Hey folks, are you getting ready for a game jam? Well, do I have the tips for you? I've got a bunch of tips here that are from a publicly available Google Doc. All right, this is from the fantastic person, Mr. Kyle Gabler, and he is representing the Pittsburgh IDGA. So he's created a bunch of tips here, in addition to some other advice, for anybody who might be interested in doing a game jam for the first time. If you're not familiar with game jams, this is the crazy idea of trying to make a game in like 48 hours. And it's so much fun. I highly recommend it if you haven't given it a try already. I have a lot of fun with it, especially because even though I've been making games for like 5 years professionally, I'm not that good at making them like super fast. Making games really fast is actually very hard and it is a skill in itself. And so I'm always trying to get better at that. And so game jams are a great way for me to meet other people. A lot of times it's up and coming people, students, folks like that, or hobbyists, and help carry the torch forward and inspire people to make games, but also to train my own skills, learn a new technology, stuff like that. And it's honestly just a lot of fun. It's like a big party where we're celebrating game dev. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that? All right, so here are the jammer tips. Number one. Okay, number one, you want to come with as much of your tool set and pipeline figured out. So this is actually one of my favorite parts of game dev, let me say, is building out tools. I love tooling, but that is not the spirit of the game jam. The spirit of the game jam is you're kind of doing what is minimum to get the game out of the door. And probably that's going to mean not building out your own sprite library, is what he says here. You want to use established tools where you can, like Unity, in order to get the basic UI stood up as fast as possible. He also adds that something like 2D is going to be a lot easier than 3D. Also, source control is something kind of complicated for you to figure out. So source control is where we have two people kind of working on the game at once, or maybe even much more than two people. How are you going to resolve changes to certain files that may have happened to the same files but from different people? For example, if somebody changes a number to 5, somebody else changes it to 7, which one are you going to go with? Are you going to go with the 5 or are you going to go with the 7, right? If this guy over here changes the way that a certain picture looks and you change it on your own machine, how are you going to resolve that conflict? It can get pretty gnarly, and generally for game jams, I would just recommend you're using some sort of shared Dropbox or Google Drive, and that's what he's recommending here. But to use something like there is software for this, right? Called version control software like SVN, Perforce, GitHub. Git is probably what he means by that. But basically, you can use those programs as well, though I think it's probably not necessary for something as large as a game jam. Usually, you're going to just have your most experienced person on the team taking all the assets in from everybody else who's sending them over to him and kind of combining them on his or her computer to get something put together. But basically, there's a lot of ways to cook an egg, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Now, the next tip was to embrace constraints. Constraints can feel limiting, but often they breed creativity and innovation. He says, love your constraints, embrace them. If you find yourself stuck brainstorming, you might want to consider adopting an arbitrary constraint that can make it fun, and it could also just kind of get you out of that rut and start building. All right. I don't know what these pictures are. Audience, theme, tools, input. I guess these are all the different ways that you can constrain your game. All right. The biggest constraint you need to embrace is time, okay? You have only a very limited amount. For most people, a game jam is going to be 48 hours, and you do have to sleep during that time period. You got to eat, sleep, shower. There are things that you have to do. However, sometimes people do it even less, right? I think I'm going to be pretty busy this game jam, so I'm probably just going to be jamming for one of the 3 days. And even then, it's just about making the most of the time that you have. So with that being said, you want to create an idea that has a very strong minimum viable prototype, an MVP, something that can get done super fast. And then if you have time, you can add on to it. You don't want something that alone, like just to get the initial version, is going to take the whole time period. You want to make something that you could very reasonably say, I can get this done in like 4 hours of work, and then I'll add on to it. If you need to hold your breath for like a whole day before you get something that's playable, it's not a good idea for a game jam. It's probably something that can either be reduced down or you save it for another time. Okay, embrace your time constraint. You're not going to be making a game on the scale of Call of Duty. Wow, those guns look awesome. I love these rails. These are so nice. All right. Or even Minecraft. Okay, you can't make Minecraft in 48 hours. Despite what the YouTube headline titles will sometimes tell you. Okay? What about Portal? Portal is too big. But you can start to see mechanics that you would break out into a smaller experience with a game like Portal. Okay, even the world of Goo is too big. Same with Angry Birds. Though consider a single level of Angry Birds in the ballpark of what's possible. You certainly can see how you might have prototyped the core mechanic quickly, and then you can build a complete prototype game experience around the mechanic that is much smaller than the full edition of Angry Birds. Cannabalt gets close to the mark. I haven't played that one. Bottom line is you got to focus, all right? Find a concept that has a tight core of what is fun or unique about it and focus on that. It may help to think of GGJ as a proof of concept or a pitch rather than as the creation of a full game with all the features that you'd actually want if you were to ever to ship or sell the game. In the industry, this is called scope, and you want to keep it as small as possible, okay? P.S. That doesn't mean just pursue safe, small, boring ideas. It means pursue ideas that have a very tight core that don't require a lot of trappings in order to be playable. Now, whatever you build for the GGJ, make sure the players get to the core interaction within the first 30 seconds. You don't want to have a long intro. If your instructions take more than 30 seconds, then your game might just be too complicated. You want to get to the core as fast as possible so people can see what your game is all about. Now, most people only are going to play your game for a few minutes at most. Make sure that they can experience the full game loop in that time. So if your game was Portal, you'd want players to be able to solve that first puzzle within just a minute or two. If your game was Angry Birds, then that first level shouldn't take more than, say, 90 seconds. If your game was a Journey, you'd want people to reach the first gate in the first couple of minutes. All right, I don't know what he's talking about there in terms of a gate on a Journey. I think you might be mixing metaphors, but I think the point stands. You want to get this game done fast, and you also want the game to be experienced fast, okay? There's kind of two timelines to be thinking about there, the player experience and the developer experience at the same time, and both of them need to optimize for your very limited time constraints. Now, game jams are stressful, and game jams are short. So if you're learning a new platform or a new tool, you might want to then go light on the crazy game mechanics. If you've got a crazy game mechanic, then you're probably going to want to work with tools that you know. We recommend crazy mechanics over new platforms as a general rule, just because it's easy to get stuck on a technical issue that can sometimes be very frustrating. Now, I'm going to editorialize again here. I'll say that game jams are actually a really great way for you to pick up a new technology and learn something. So I think that's a lot of fun. It really just depends on what you want to do. There's going to be people who are going to the game jam because they just want to make friends and they just want to hang out together. They just want to party. There's other people who are there because they want to learn a new technology. That was me in my last game jam. Me and my friend Scott got together and we were like, we want to learn Godot. We've heard so much about it. We want to try it out. We're going to make a fairly simple game, but one that's, interesting and charming in its own way. But something that's pretty straightforward that we think we can get done with a tool we're totally brand new to. And then there are people who try to do something a little bit crazy operating on something that they know. They're really focused on just doing a brand new game mechanic. Something that might come to mind for that would be the game Super Hot. Super Hot, right? That game is a great example of kind of a fun mechanic that came out of a jam, went on to become probably like one of the most well-known VR games of all time. So very successful game jam game. All right. And we got some more photos here. Okay, it's easy in a jam to get hung up on some part of your design or process, and before you know it, 5 hours have gone by. Okay, here are some of the common rabbit holes that trip up jam teams. Sometimes you get stuck in brainstorming and no one idea stands out. There may be multiple ideas that seem really promising and your team might be divided on which idea to pursue. If that's the case, you don't want to spend more than an hour or two at most talking about the ideas, okay? Really, you don't want to spend any more time than necessary as talking. You want to be doing. If one idea hasn't jumped out to you by then, jopped out to you by then, it's time to do some work, okay? If you have a general direction, maybe start building the basic functionality for that direction. And if you're really stuck between multiple ideas, maybe split your team up to develop each one a bit further, then get back together, share what you developed, and hopefully you'll find your directions clearer. Okay, that's what they're recommending. My recommendation to you is just set a very clear line with people, being like, hey guys, you know, you don't come in here with your baby. We're not going to be able to make exactly the game that anybody has in their mind. Be open to change. And then if we get into a situation like this, I would honestly just flip a coin, and it's like, let's do whatever, you know, if both of them seem promising, well, let's just do whatever, right? Like, let's just get started. Prototyping and developing ideas doesn't have to be done in code. Grab a whiteboard and start drawing out the game and walking through the interaction you're talking about. Or maybe make a quick paper prototype that people can play with to see your game. This is particularly helpful if your game has board game-like qualities. Now, of course, you want to start building something in code when you can. These are all different ways of exploring an ideas potential that can help you get your, and all right, I don't know, I understand basically what he's saying here, but let me tell you something. If you want to make a game for a global game jam that is not a video game, that is super cool. I think there's been a lot of people who've done that, whether they make a folk kind of game that you could just play in person, or they make a board game that you can print out. There's certainly been a lot of entries in that vein. So I would say it doesn't even need to be code, okay? I think a lot of times in the game development industry, we lean towards code, right? You go to GDC, the Game Developers Conference, and it's overwhelmingly all video game development, but there is a place here for analog games. It doesn't need to be digital. All right. Are you still stuck? Here's one way to decide. Build the simpler idea first. And if it doesn't work, you wasted less time than building the more complex concept, only to find that that might not have worked either. Now, just like you don't want to get stuck brainstorming, you don't want to get stuck in development too. Time is short. If you find yourself spending more than an hour or two on a feature or mechanic without making significant progress, regroup and talk about how you would redirect, or if that feature is really core, to keep it all. For example, if you've been trying 2 hours to get the physics hooked up, and you're not really any closer than when you started, maybe it's time to reevaluate if you need physics. All right, physics, who needs them? Embrace your constraints. Now, this flowchart is probably self-explanatory, but basically throughout the jam, you will have ideas that start with, wouldn't it be awesome if, and many of these ideas would be awesome, but you can't do them all. So remember just to do the quick and dirty rule of filtering out your awesome ideas. If you can't do it quick and it's not core to your game, then cut it. That doesn't mean the idea is lost. You can write it down, save it for later. Maybe do it later in this jam when you have the time, or maybe do it in a different game when you have the time to do that. All right, there's nothing wrong with inspiring making more games. If you come out of this jam and you've got 2 awesome ideas for a game you want to build, that's a win for me. Now, don't wait too. I will admit though, I have way more game ideas than I know what to do with. It's really just a matter of when do you find the time to get it done, but it is what it is. So don't wait too long to get someone from outside your team in front of the game. All right. It's natural to want to wait until more of the game is in place before someone else sees it, but you can't wait. You don't need polished art or completed in-game feedback to play test your core mechanic. You want to get that input early and often to find problems and figure out what works. Now, everyone on your team is important, but your programmers are probably going to be your most limiting resource and people crunching the most at the end. Use them smartly to make sure everyone else can contribute early and without adding work. And make sure your coders don't burn out before you finish. Here are some strategies for that. All right, now, let's see what we got here. First, you want to be consistently evaluating your feature prioritization and making sure that the tasks for your coders are the right ones and that are clear. You want to write stuff down. Talking about features alone can leave things ambiguous, but if you make a shared list in numerical order of what is clearly the most important, then they can work through that list systematically. You're going to want to start with temporary assets as soon as you can, right? You don't want your coder to be waiting for the art background before he can code the background. Just, do a little quick thing in Paint or Photoshop in like 5 seconds and give it to him so he just has something to work with. And he can work with that bad art until you have the good art or better art to give to him. Okay. Now, as much as you can, you want to invest some time into making sure that your artists and audio folks can work independent of your coders. If you need your programmer to swap out assets, you'll be squandering a lot of the time that they could be programming and really slowing down your asset iteration. Ask them to write something like a very simple sound manager and don't hard code any asset references. That way, audio people can swap in and out assets freely. Think about your asset import pipeline before the jam. The next thing is expose parameters wherever possible so that your designers don't have to dive in to code in order to tweak their levels or mechanics. Iteration is a part of the game jam development process, but your time is limited in a 48-hour game jam. So remember, if you're waffling between two ideas, again, just go with the simplest one, and that is probably going to give you a good idea on where to go from there. Now, anyone can get hooked on a problem and end up treading water for 5 hours, but by the time you've come up for air, you've lost a lot of precious time and you could start to feel burnt out. So you want to look out for your programmer's time. If they seem like they fall into a rabbit hole to implement a feature, talk to them about cutting it or taking a different approach. It's really important to not get stuck. That's like the most important thing with these game jams, right? It's like you just can't get stuck. Just pivot, change the idea. The most important thing is to finish somehow, some way, right? Even if it's not what you had in mind from the start. Okay, now what in the world is this little baby doing on the screen? Let's see what this slide says. There is a temptation to pull an all-nighter the first night. Okay, so this is clearly going to be about sleeping. I should have read the title. There it is, Sleep Friday Night. Now, they recommend you get at least 5 or 6 hours of sleep on Friday night so you can push hard on Saturday. If you end Friday with a clear goal of your first prototype, then you can sleep on it and start cranking away in the morning. Don't consider this lost time. Your brain is still working while you're asleep, and your body is investing in the reserves it needs for a long, long Saturday to Sunday. Also, be comfortable for sleeping. If you aren't going home, then bring pillows, sleeping bags, mattresses, all that to your jam site so you can cuddle up with a good book as your buddy next to you curses at his code as you fall asleep to the sweet sound of expletives. Okay, something like that. Maybe noise-canceling headphones. That might be a good thing to bring to the game jam. Now, don't underestimate the power of little details to really make your game. Embrace a strong art style, right? In the industry, we call this being spiky. Look for little flourishes that give your game a unique charm and feel, especially for a game jam game, where the gameplay probably is not going to be able to be as deep as you would like, so style and charm can instead be very powerful. Some examples are to go with a strong color theme and giving all your characters maybe giant eyes, or choosing a hand-drawn look, or putting extra care into the juiciness of how things move. Audio is let me just recommend 2 talks really quick. Juice It or Lose It on the topic of juicing, and Spiky Games. I think it's called Spiky Games from GDC. That may be behind a paywall. If it isn't, then maybe do Dark Souls is the IKEA of game dev. These are all some really good talks on that topic. All right. Audio is sometimes thought of as something you can put in at the end, but it can really drive the immersion and emotion of your game. So here are the 10 tips in summary. Remember, these tips are to help you. They're not absolutes. You want to take it or leave it as you see fit. They're more like guidelines. Also, for the first global game jam, Kyle Gabler of World of Goo fame made an awesome tips video. It's still good. Check it out. Okay, so here's his tips video. I have not seen this.
And over 1,000 new games are going to be created all around the world.
Awesome. So you can check out Mr. Kyle Gabler's video after this one. I'll put a link in the description of this video. I hope that this video was helpful, and if you're participating in the Global Game Jam, I want to know how it goes for you. Let me know about it in the comments. I'm looking forward to playing your games when they come out. Good luck, and maybe I'll see you there.